Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to put the oily in oil paintings as we explore the seedy, slimy world of mass-produced art hiding behind the friendly facade of your local #basic furniture outlet. All this on Created Things.
Hello and welcome to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives and the only podcast to be heretofore officially unsponsored by singer-songwriter Shawn Mendes and here to come officially unsponsored by the entire Homegoods family of quality home decor products. I'm Father Gabriel Toretta, Dominican priest, medievalist, guy with a beard, among other things. And with me is my co-host, artist, psychotherapist, Moon Unit Florist Popcheck. How are you?
I'm all right. Wait, what did you say my first name was?
Moon Unit.
Moon Unit. Yes, you're calling me Moon Unit now. I forgot you were going to call me Moon Unit from now on. So this is an off-air conversation. I sent a photograph of myself when I was 15 to Father Gabriel to prove that I used to be a huge, edgy scene kid. And he pointed out accurately that, you make the point that you made.
Well, I was looking at this photograph and I was just long hair, leather jacket,
boot cut jeans, wide boot cut
jeans. I just thought I'm sorry, was your dad Frank Zappa and I never knew it? Which is weird because I've met his dad and I don't think his dad is Frank Zappa, but my
dad's just about the furthest thing from Zappa that you can be.
But this produced a son who when he was 15 thought that he was Moon Unit Zappa. I'm afraid that it could be possible that in this fallen world that there would be a listener who didn't know that Frank Zappa's son is named Moon Unit.
Yes,
which is very important.
Yeah, but now you know.
Now everyone knows.
This
This is a solid. I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, and so my just deep integrated into my being is these kind of the more you know sort of advertisements, and this is it. It's like the did you know Moon Unit Zappa is Frank Zappa's son? The more you know.
We should do a whole episode on weird celebrity names.
That's or just a whole episode on the more you know culture, because I loved that. Those were so good.
That was two separate episodes. I do. Yeah. No, this is what we do. We start an episode and then we think of the 3 other episodes we'd rather be doing. In part, I would rather be doing a different episode today because as you spoke to in your intro here, this is going to be one of those episodes I think we're just going to burn a ton of bridges.
I'm open to that. I am open to bridge burning.
We're going to burn a lot of bridges with this. I will also be completely honest. I've never felt more conflicted on a topic that we've discussed ever.
Good.
Ever. I have so many strong feelings at odds with each other. I don't know what to do with any of them. I'm kind of hoping we don't even come to a conclusion, but I will say that I was sort of going through my notes that I pulled together for this episode because I was doing a ton of research. This episode also has the potential to be our most NPR, Ira Glass sort of serial type episode because it's just so kind of expose-y, I feel like. So I'm going to do that now.
Okay.
I think I'm going to bring us in that way.
Bring it in.
So Kyle, if you could give us some Kyle, our producer, if you could give us some tinkly, children's keyboard serial style music behind us.
The more you know. Oh, sorry, that's different.
No,
that's different. Gosh, dang it.
Imagine that you are walking into a furniture store. Perhaps it's a Homegoods. Perhaps it's a Target. Perhaps just a Bed Bath & Beyond. You see the sweaters in the corner. Perhaps an ottoman. Perhaps a garden gnome with something sassy on his shovel. But as you make your way back to the store, you find the subject of today's podcast. Hundreds and hundreds of mass-produced oil paintings. Where do they come from? Where do they go? And how do they get there, Cotton Eye Joe? I'm Jacob Popchak, and this is Created Things.
Yeah, this is exactly it. Did you know that you could go into one of the aforementioned stores or a host of many others, and you could ask a well-trained clerk, where is your wall decor section? Mm-hmm. And then if that clerk brought you to the wall decor section, you would discover that what wall decor is a bunch of mass-produced oil paintings of various kinds.
Yeah, man. And so look, you know, we did the episode on Christmas kitsch. I still want to do an episode on Catholic kitsch. But this is a different thing. I don't know, maybe it isn't, but it feels like a different thing. As an artist, to go, and as like a, you know, as a visual artist, as someone who, you know, I do illustration, I do concept art, I do graphic design, to go into one of these stores, and it's first of all, the amount of real estate dedicated in these stores to these paintings is flabbergasting. I mean, like literally a quarter of any to a third of any given Homegoods is going to be aisle after aisle after aisle of just every sized canvas and and just with weird shit on them, like giraffes holding balloons and dogs in suits. And, you know, probably there are going to be 150 scenes of like the Eiffel Tower and, you know, just paintings of fruit and forks and sunflowers and just hundreds of them. And as an artist to walk in and I see, you know, I'm a millennial, I'm a young guy. I see my friends buying their first homes sometimes, if they're lucky, in most cases, you know, getting apartments with their spouses and things like this. And that, you know, they're trying to furnish their homes on a budget, and they'll go and they'll buy some of these paintings. And it's just so fundamentally offensive to me, to an emotional degree that I haven't quite thought through. And I'm not sure if I even intellectually agree with yet. But I just want to start with the emotions of it, because I am pissed off when I go in these stores and I see all this shit. It makes me really, really, really mad. It's basically the only thing that goes through my head, because we've made sort of a joke in this podcast, right? Where, you know, you'll say, oh, this feels bad, or I don't like this thing, and I'll make some sort of obnoxiously overly deep argument on behalf of the thing's innate goodness. This is like maybe the only thing that I look at and my brain just screams, this is fake art. This is not real art. This is bad art. I hate it. It's insulting to me and everything that I am, and we should burn it. And that's why I wanted to do an episode on it. And then I started doing research, and now I don't know what to do.
Now everything is insane. Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm kind of excited about it, because I also, like, this is the kind of stuff that I tend to look at in a store and be like, you know, I like grab the person I'm with and be like, look, you could pay $100 for a like 2 foot by 3 foot image with an ampersand in negative space created by like gold spray paint glitter. Mm-hmm. You could do that. And I just like, this just makes me like so ecstatic, because like it's so insane. Everything about it's wild. But I already like the dynamic, which is that like, I mean, obviously I'm not an artist, and I have a lot of thoughts about these things, but when I first see them, I mostly just think, I mostly have sort of thoughts of, superiority, superciliousness, and scorn, which is a list of S words that does not include like disgust. Yeah, that's an S word because it has an S in it. So, but there is this whole dynamic about them, which is really fascinating, which is like, so the majority of these things, like just judging, first kind of from the economics of it, they exist exactly the way that you describe, which is like, whatever the genesis, whether it's like I'm I'm not in college anymore. I'm not going to put posters on my wall. Or like I've just moved into a home or whatever, and I want to have some things. The most immediate genesis, I think, basically is like, I have $39.99 and I would like some contemporary canvas wall art. Mm-hmm. And so you go to the place where you can exchange $39.99 for contemporary canvas wall art. Intriguingly, though, the economic range goes pretty high. So not at individual Homegoods, but at their website, the most money that you can spend for a piece of contemporary canvas wall art. Guess.
I don't know, but I'm so glad that because I didn't even think to look at the website.
Oh, yeah.
That's so dumb of me, but I love that you did. Okay.
Just give a guess. Just give a guess.
Okay.
The average, average is about $39.99.
The average is about $39.99. It can't be over 300, 500, right? Like somewhere in that window.
$1,300.
F off.
You can spend $1,299.99 for 3 different images by I'm just gonna tell you what the images are quickly, and then we'll talk a little bit about the artist, because this, I think, could be an interesting entree into getting into what's sort of rich and complicated and dumpster fiery and fun about this whole thing. So you could pay $1,300 for a 3D $100 bill in a shadow box type frame, which I didn't catch the exact dimensions, but it's probably like 4 feet long, something like that's rather large.
Wait, what do you mean 3D $100 bill?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jacob. It's that
like a base relief, like sculpted.
Well, so it's just that if you look at it, so the images consists of a series of, I think, upraised triangular pieces of paper. I believe so. So that if you look at it straight on, it's $100 bill, and if you look at it from the left, it is also, but using different image, like using actual different physical image surfaces, it is also, however, $100 bill. And if you look at it from the right hand side, now get this, also using a different set of image surfaces, it will be a $100 bill. Ugh. Now there's 2 others of these that you could buy, and those other ones have 3 different images, so that you look at it one way and it's one thing, the left way and it's another thing, and then the right way and it's different. It's a different thing.
That's a little cooler.
This one it caught my attention because it was just like the trashiest concept I could possibly think of. And here's what's great. You might think to yourself, like, okay, so maybe I want to buy that. I don't know, but I'm online shopping, and so I'm going to do what good remote shopping experiences have done since the glory days of mail order catalogs, and I'm going to read the decorative text to help me understand, the shopping blurb to help me understand what it is. This is it, and I quote from homegoods.com. Bring a dynamic look to your space with the artfully distressed, contrasting, and unique design of this dollar bill wall art.
Oh, God, kill me, man.
No, what's important to recognize about this is that this is actual word salad.
Right.
Like it literally doesn't make sense. It actually, as just like an English language sentence, it doesn't make sense. Bring a dynamic look to your space. Okay, that's a sort of like cliche kind of like talk, but at least it makes sense. But here's where it breaks down with the artfully distressed, contrasting, and unique design. That set of descriptors can't actually hold together. So what's happened, and then there's no such thing of a dollar bill wall art, that it's described as if that was a genre, like a category of things that exist. However, there is only one member in that set, so technically speaking, by mathematical principles, it does exist as a set, but it's a set with one occupant, but you realize what's happening here is that absolutely all of this text is crafted to answer Google search queries.
Oh, sure.
That's all it is. So that's why it's a set of kind of buzzwordy descriptors that are not even organized so as to hang together. And then it just defines it lists in nouns what the thing is, and it uses some catchy buzzwords to create almost a sentence in it. And the only reason that you do that is for Google search optimization.
Right. Well, okay. So I'm actually glad. Okay. Because you're hitting on maybe something, and I'm just considering this now, maybe something that's pissing me off about this art at the outset. And I think there are layers to this. And again, I'm not even sure if I'm right to be calling this art, but I don't know what the hell else to call this. So I'm just going to be flippantly using that term. But so I've done what now, like 9, I think, children's books or illustrated books, period, and several of them have been for children, and almost all of them have been for Christian publishers. And this is one of these things that, I mean, this will probably lose me work to say this out loud, but like, my God, like when I get reviews back in editing rounds on illustrations, especially when it comes to cover design. Cover design is where this really gets bad, right? And it's never, oh, like we want to adjust the color palette, or oh, this character, we want to shift this character a little bit, because that would be work, but that would be work that I enjoyed and I'd be interested, and I would feel like they were taking the art seriously to be looking at that closely. No. It's like, if it's a Christian book, no matter what the book is about, no matter what the symbolism is, like, we have to have a cross on the cover. There has to be a cross on the cover.
Is that right?
And we need to make the subtitle just 15 words long. And it needs to be like a Christian child's first book about Jesus it's like that line from Nacho Libre where like, the sisters of the mountain, of the flower, of the river, of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Like, and I always used to joke that, like, okay, we're gonna get crass here, but I used to joke that this was the shared space, and your rantings about sentimentality have shown me there's a lot more shared space. But I always used to joke that this is the shared space in the Venn diagram between Christian films and porn, where like the title conventions are exactly the same.
It has to be the entire, like the content of the whole thing. So it'd be like,
right, the whole script is written on the title. So
plumber who visits the stay-at-home mom is converted to Christianity by her knitting. You know, yeah,
exactly. MILFs 3. Yeah, it's like at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's like, you know, there's never any, and this is the subtitles of these books too, and they'll make me change the art to these dictations, and it's the same thing. It's the SEO. It's the search engine optimization.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's,
yeah.
You know, and that I feel like is right off the bat really, really dangerous to art, right? Because isn't it? I mean, is it not? That's a whole question, I guess. Is mass appeal dangerous to art? First off, and then is mass appeal by way of algorithm even more dangerous to whether or not something can be art, right? And I don't know, maybe I'll get this out of the way now, but like, so we touched on this a little in our episode on papyrus, but I've been studying a lot into sort of this subgenre, often referred to as racist fonts, right? Fonts that were sort of developed very explicitly to frame a certain community, and then became associated with a community, and now so like the chop suey font that you see on like a lot of old time Chinese restaurants is a good example of this. The font that's used in the original Jurassic Park logo was originally invented for like these sort of I'm a handsome white man and I've got to save the white girl from the black savages kinds of movies. It was like a stereotypical Congo text.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
and like this is why Jurassic Park uses it, is it's actually like aping that cinematic tradition from pre-code film.
Comic Sans, of course.
It's Comic Sans a racist font?
Well, it's an active hatred against the human race. So I feel like it's
racist.
You know,
save that for the Comic Sans episode when we interview whoever the creator of that is.
My friends, this is never going to happen.
But you know, I think a good read that I've heard on the racist fonts thing is like, can even a font be racist? Can it not be racist? Well, it doesn't matter because it's hack. At the end of the day, it's hack, right? And you know, hack is this term that like when a comedian makes a joke that you've heard 18 billion times, that's hack. You know what I mean? And in the same way, art, like racist fonts are hack because they've been, at the very least, they've been done so many billions of times that you're not saying anything new. You're not saying anything creative. You're not doing anything interesting. At best, you're just ripping off of the most common associations possibly proliferated throughout the consciousness of the culture, right? And hack comedy is that way. And I think this art, God, that was too long a roundabout, but I think this quote unquote art generated and curated and dictated by SEO is that too. It's just hack if you're making a Christian book to put a cross on the front of it just because you think people won't get that it's a Christian book if it doesn't have a cross on it. And it is also hack to just put a giant golden ampersand or like a sticky picture of the frickin' Eiffel Tower in the middle of your Homegoods store. And it's the generality of it that right off the outset just ekes me out. It just makes me feel gross.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a helpful sort of way of looking into it, like that there is, because like this is like naturally something that has come up about it, is like that this is mass market. These are mass market products, you know, and I mean, I have nothing against art being a product, you know, let's not kid ourselves. Art is always a product, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. That does not harm its being art, you know, that's all great. But there is something, there's a kind of an irresistibly strange dynamic about the fact that these are mass market products, you know, because like somebody on the Homegoods store doesn't like print one of these and say like, oh, I sure hope this sells. They print, like, if they're going to make any at all, you know, they buy the image rights and then they print like, I don't know, 10,000 of them. And if they all sell, then they make another 10,000 or whatever it might be. Or oftentimes they're working with design companies, right? So so then you get these big sort of interior design companies that specialize in specifically this stuff. Which, like, I want to get around to this question of mass orientation and stuff. So I'm not just distracting, because I think that's a really critical one, but like, let's just kind of keep coming at it from a few different angles, because I think that's like the central question here. So adding into that, there is this interesting dynamic happening with like some of these. So I was looking into it, like who, for instance, like what are some of these major interior design, graphic design companies that make arts for Homegoods specifically, say, for instance. One of them is this design company called Colleen Karras Designs. Interestingly, homegoods.com should probably spend a little bit more money on whoever is writing their copy, because the company's name, this design company's name is Colleen Karras. On the Homegoods website, it's listed as Colin Karras with one E.
That's sexist.
Yeah.
That's sexist.
Yeah. It's the worst, ladies and gentlemen. It's the worst. Anyway, I was checking out the Colleen Karras Design Company. And they say this. So Colleen Karras Designs was created from the love of art and design. Our design team work to set the trends in the marketplace to offer one-of-a-kind art for your home. Then they mentioned later that their stuff is available at TJ Maxx, Homegoods, Marshalls, other places. There's a lot.
Oh wow! So they're really supplying for a lot of these.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a lot that automatically catches my attention about that. Like, I love the concept that. I mean, right away, I love this idea that it's created for the love of art and design. That's apparently said without irony, which is I love everything about that. This is the company that produced the gold ampersand PS, or the ampersand, a negative space around gold.
Sure.
That their goal is to set the trends in the marketplace. Okay, so that's interesting. Not exactly to be. So that's how different that is from wanting to be cutting edge or whatever, right? We're setting the trends in the marketplace. So this is explicitly a marketplace product, which again, I have no qualm. This does not make me uncomfortable. Like talking about art as a marketplace product does not make me uncomfortable. I think that's perfectly normal, but it's a particular lens that's being foregrounded there. And then two other things I would say that immediately catch my attention just from that little description. What they do is they hope to do for you is to offer one-of-a-kind art for your home.
Right. That was the part that was an immediate red flag for me. What?
Right. It is being sold. And I don't know that this information is publicly available, but like I would just guess that these are being sold in print runs of 10,000 or so each, right? There's no way it could be significantly less than that. Then it'd be economically viable.
No, it can't be.
Just because there's so many of these stores. So one of a kind at an extraordinarily large kind. One of an extraordinarily large number of a kind. So already brings up these really interesting ideas. And then the last thing I want to point out about that, and I wanted to hear your take on any one of those elements, is there is a very strong unspoken presence of, to put it in the most negative and aggressive possible way,
do it.
Unspoken, voiceless, unnamed art minions.
Yeah.
Cause I picture, you just you picture these sort of I went to art school for this, sort of like working chained to a desk and this. Now, for all I know, Colleen Karras designs might pay phenomenally well. They might pay their artists really, really well. I know nothing about that, and I'm not trying to make any claims that they don't. But just but there is immediately about this kind of like the smooth, polished, like one of a kind, creative for love of art and design. There are no artists' names anywhere available, anywhere other than Colleen Karras designs.
Yes.
And that I guess that's the last point I want to make about just that little promo blurb and like all these interesting like socioeconomic and artistic elements that come out from it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I do want to break and just mention that this episode is sponsored by Colleen Karras. No, I'm kidding. No, so obviously the one of the kind thing is just patently false, right? Now, I can't argue with we do this out of love for art and design. I'm kind of fascinated by the juxtaposition, and already we're getting more philosophical than I want to, but I'm kind of fascinated by the juxtaposition of we do it for the love of art and design, and we want to set the trends.
Yeah.
Because those two things, in my now again, maybe per our episode on tortured artists, maybe I'm buying into a really problematic, starving artist ideal of what art is. And I'm, because of that, sitting here going, hey, real art can't be done exclusively to pursue trends. That's not art, if that's why you're doing it. I don't know if that's not art. That's just what my instinct tells me. But my instinct tells me is that those two sentiments are wildly at odds with each other. What I know is definitely problematic, though, regardless of my subjective opinion, is this latter point that you're making about that none of their artists are mentioned. Because that I have a huge frickin' problem with. Because I am not saying that you have to only hang original artworks in your house. I am not that much of a snob. If every artist I know had to make their living selling individual, unique art pieces, they would die, and they're already dying, right? We need to sell prints. There's a thing, there are art prints, and you can do different runs of prints, and this is fine. But you have your name on the damn print. You can establish your portfolio, you can build up, people can say, oh, I have a print of this artist, but someday I want to have the full thing, right? That is good. that has always been a part of the art movement, and that is important, and that is good, because that is a proliferation of the art form. And to build on something we were talking about in kitsch, in Christmas kitsch, right? We had talked about how kitsch is sort of this like velveteen rabbit thing of like people having a relationship with the art, but not the artist. But we had specified that in true art, there is ultimately some kind of unspoken relationship between the artist and the viewer or the possessor of the art. That there's a connection made between these two people who may never meet via the artwork. And if you actively and intentionally seek to remove that, then screw you, man. Like, that's not okay. And so if this was a website being like, hey, buy a print of Jill so-and-so because she does all these dogs in suits, you know, I might still have a problem with how hack and wide appeal and SEO based the dogs in suits were, but at least I'd say good for Jill. But I can't say good for anyone because they're not allowing these artists or providing an opportunity for these artists to have any kind of connection with the broader zeitgeist.
Good for
and
Colin
that, as an artist, I have a huge
designs.
problem with.
But
Yeah.
no, okay. So I admit I was kind of setting you up because I sort of assumed that would be your response. But I genuinely want to know, like, what is different, and I get that. And that's also my first take. And I'm not saying it's not my second take as well. But how different is that from, to go way back, any time that you have like workshop art production? So basically anything from, you know, I don't know when this stuff would even start because it's very ancient, but like, let's just set a beginning and say like the 13th and 14th century. So like mid to late Middle Ages. You have, so I mean, we can see the effects of this now. You go to a museum and it'll say like workshop of Fra Angelico, and they don't know who any of these guys' names are, or very, very few of them. They know that, like, so we know, like, for instance, the Fra Angelico, like, there used to be this myth, kind of like with Michelangelo, that he had like done all of this by himself, and this was part of why he's a saint or whatever. Is that he, you know, whatever, painted like a thousand things, which is just not true. Like he worked like everybody worked, and he had a workshop and lots of people who were working with him and whom he trained and all these kinds of things. And he would like sketch outlines and then they would fill them in, or like they would design most of the stuff and he would sort of like give approbation or whatever. But again, we don't know their names, and nobody really knew their names. There's a group of people working, if you would put it that way, at like Gianna Fiesole Designs in the 14th century or 14th and 15th century. So that's one. Now, and then
I love, for a side note, I love that you correct yourself there. Like, anybody's gonna be listening to this and be like, well, it was actually the 15th century as well. These guys don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Ridiculous. I always confuse myself on the Fra Angelico's dates for really embarrassing reasons. So there's that. So there is that question about like, now that's a kind of communal work. What we're talking about there is a kind of communal art project, where actually what is important is that it's a given workshop that produces it, more than that it's the individual creativity of a certain specific person. But I also might say, like, in what way is Colin Karras Designs and the various sort of like design factories behind other things like Homegoods and Marshalls, etc., how are they different from like what Andy Warhol did, for instance, which you know a lot more about than I do?
Right. Well, so Andy Warhol is doing something very different than all those guys. I think you're totally right to say that actually maybe this is the same thing as what Fra Angelico's doing. Right. Now, I still might have a problem with that, and I want to wax eloquent on that in a second. But Andy Warhol was doing a very different thing, where he was intentionally making a comment on, because you got to remember, like, Andy Warhol was a performance artist first and a visual artist second. So when he's creating a painting, it's not just the painting that's the art. It's where that painting's going to be placed that's the art. It's what other art that's ripping off. It's the way that art is ripping it off, and it's the way it's being produced. So when he does his triptych of Elvis, I think it's a triptych, and the way it's actually reprinted, changes the scan lines on the different canvases, he's making a comment about mass-produced art. And this is what he kind of lived in commentary on, was aping and commenting on, is advertising art, is religious kitsch art? Because, I mean, he painted 100 different depictions of the Last Supper in the last couple of years of his life after he was assassinated. So he
after he was assassinated, and then came the really great art.
Right. No, really, it did. He was shot by the leader of the Scum Manifesto, the writer of the Scum Manifesto. And we'll do a whole thing on this, but she was this radical feminist who wrote something called the Scum Manifesto, which was literally an argument that we should just murder men and only keep a certain amount in society for procreative purposes, and they should be slaves. And this was an actual treatise that she put forward. And she wrote this really, really disgusting play, just full of farts and feces and everything, genuinely actually gross, and sent it to Andy Warhol and expected him to produce this for her because she was like, oh, he's an ally because he's gay, so he'll just do this. He's one of the good men. And he didn't, because he thought it was trash. So she shot him. She shot him.
No idea. I knew that he was shot because there's a
and all his organs fell out, and he had to wear a girdle for the last several years of his life to keep his organs inside his body. And he was in constant excruciating pain.
Gosh, I had no idea.
And it was during this time that he was like, I want to revisit all that religious kitsch I did at the beginning of my career, and I'm going to do 100 different paintings of the Last Supper. And he became very, very into studying mortality and things that way, as one does when you're shot by a femme terrorist. Anyway, he was existing in commentary on shit. But I'll be honest, I have a problem with this idea with basically any other example outside of Andy, including the ones you mentioned with Michelangelo and Fra Angelico, about artists being unnamed. And I recognize that is a modern privilege that I have, right? This is something that's discussed all the time about Disney films, where only the top 30 to 50 animators are in those credits at the beginning of that Disney film.
Right.
And they don't have the hundreds of women that are painting in the art, in the ink and paint department downstairs. And they don't have all of the grunts who are making $2 a week and working 14 hours a day. They don't have those people in the credits. And this is very much, as Hollywood went through that revolution, it kind of changed, I think, the public consciousness about the way we perceive art and the way we perceive accreditation, and different actors unions, producers unions, guilds in Hollywood started protesting for greater credit, and we got things like IMDb. And I think the rest of the art world has sort of looked to Hollywood as that trendsetter, and we've all sort of said, hey, it's really unethical that people would be uncredited. And I recognize that is an ethical idea that is very, 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 very new in the history of the human experience of art. And I, as a child of this time period, am biased. And I don't want to fall into that thing that we often criticize, where I just assume that because it's my morality, anyone in the past who didn't share it was wrong.
Bad.
But it
bad
also
people.
But it also doesn't mean that they weren't wrong, right? I'm trying to just evaluate that ethic on its own basis, and as I am, I just think it's from a Catholic perspective, because you're Michelangelo, Fra Angelico, Catholic artists, right? Mm-hmm. Your reference and the dignity of the human person is so important. And I can't personally rationalize how leaving an artist who, bled and sweat and teared all over this thing uncredited is at all consistent with the dignity of the human person and with the dignity of beauty and art. I can't swallow that pill. But you don't have any of the hangups with modernism that I do, where you don't have any of these illusions of ethics now are better now because they're now. So right. Maybe you disagree with me.
Yeah, I do. And I'm trying to think of, so how the best way to put it. So one, is that okay, so in the contemporary framework, I'd say I'd say all things being equal, it is better to give credit to somebody who has been involved in the project than not, right? That's something important. That's all good. There are limits to how far that can extend, just material limits. How far do we draw the boundaries of cooperation and participation, et cetera, et cetera. But on all things being equal, I'd say, yeah, we should err on the side of like including someone's name and being open about what their involvement was rather than not. And there are various reasons why that's a little bit easier now, partly because of a lot of the stuff was kind of released digitally, or it was more fungible in terms of like how long something can be, et cetera, et cetera. But there is involved in that a real notion that, in fact, your point about like sort of isn't it more Catholic, or isn't it coming from a recognizably Catholic perspective to say like, well, but the dignity of the person is at the heart of the matter. That's one way of narrating what's happening. Another way of narrating what's happening is to say that like we are seeing yet again the sort of effect of the 18th century, 17th century, 18th century kind of Kant artist as genius, artist as primary authority kind of idea that so deeply sank into our understanding of like what an artist is and what art is, that we're seeing that play out in a more dramatic way. We're just continuing to see that play out. There is something really fascinating about the way in which artworks could be communal projects, including communal projects where no one's name would ever be known, or where only one person's name would ever be known, that I think is really interesting. It's not that these people didn't maybe want to have their names known at some level, but that like, if we think of, say, religious art specifically, something that's really dramatically important about it is that it is like the primary the primary audience considered is God, which is why you get, these like Gothic churches with to the human eye invisible statues and stuff like 30 stories up, right? That like the last human eye ever to see it before, drones and stuff was the guy who carved it and then climbed off set it there and climbed off the scaffolding, that like there's this communal art project that we do, and it's important that we all contribute it, and it's the dignity of our lives that we do so, but it's also sort of the dignity of our lives that it is not I who receive the glory and the praise for it, but it's God ultimately. Now, this is I'm talking specifically religious art, and so it's a little bit easier on that.
Where it's a much harder argument to make when you get into mass-produced gold ampersands.
When you get to like,
signs.
Our friend Colin Karras Designs, it does become a little bit harder, because then we're saying, well, who gets the honor for this is Colin Karras and her designs.
Well, if even that, because nobody's looking at that painting and going, oh, I just can't wait for the next Colin Karras design that's coming out. They're just like, it's a picture
it's true.
It's a picture of a dog at Homegoods. You know what I mean? Like that's all it is.
Yeah. No, you're right. So let me just say, like, I have some resistance, because I think it is important to recognize that like the name of the artist is not actually always the most important thing, and that there are ways of producing art that by their nature can't really leave any, at least material, evidence of who the artist was behind. So like, I mean, almost any kind of sculpture, like almost any kind of what you would call Kleinkunst, like decorative arts, like these kinds of things, like almost none of them by their character are the kind of thing that can leave the artist's name behind, at least materially integrated into the object. Tapestries, various kinds of decorative textiles, etc. Like you just can't, and in the end, like that's a kind of a sacrifice that the artist makes, is recognizing that that's how it's going to work. I mean, like thinking about decorative textiles makes me think, as it does for most people, about like sort of late medieval women's convents would spend like a year or more sewing together this gigantic this is a thing like in Germany, for instance. It's now Germany. These absolutely staggeringly beautiful, gigantic, either tapestries or decorative textiles of various kinds. And we know that like pretty much the whole monastery or people who were capable enough worked on it. Sometimes we know that it was just a few hands working on it. But we don't know any of their names. We don't know anything about it. Like if you cite it, like if you say who did this textile, it'd be like, well, it's the nuns of Windesheim.
Yeah.
You know.
So I want to clarify. So my fervor here, and again, I have all these feelings, but I'm actively processing them here, and I have all these thoughts that are at odds with each other.
I'm sorry. I would like that to be our motto. I have all these feelings.
And
Second motto, and I'm processing them here.
Yeah, we should sell a mug with that.
So good.
A mass-produced mug. I want to be clear, though, that this is not for me primarily an issue of credit.
Okay.
Cool. I'm not actually... Because I agree with you. I mean, look, I'm working partially in the theme park design industry, right? Imagineers, theme park designers don't get credit at all. You don't know.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like
good.
there are 500 Imagineers who worked on this ride and they're not mentioned. So I'm not uncomfortable with that idea.
Okay.
I'm not uncomfortable with that idea as a Catholic. I'm not uncomfortable with it and in terms of art history, and I'm not uncomfortable with it now. Maybe this is me coming in as a psychotherapist more than an artist, but I think that a fundamental component of what makes art, and really what makes anything worth anything, is connection and relationship.
Sure.
Right? This for me is kind of fundamental. So to use your example, the reason why a lack of accreditation is okay in those religious examples is because they don't really give a shit about the people who are coming into church and seeing those things. They're really secondary. This is for God.
Right.
So the connection is there.
Mm-hmm.
If there's an aesthetic component to art, there's a technical component to art, there's a content component to art. What is this thing about, or what is it saying? But then I think that there's also a relational component to art, and I think the relational box is checked whenever you're painting or sculpting for God. All right, great. You're not going to be accredited. He knows what you're doing. Awesome. But to sell a fabricated painting in a Homegoods, which again, this is what this is about, that gives the appearance of not being a collective work.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's helpful. Yeah.
But doesn't give you the connection with the artist is inherently deceitful, right? No one's going to Disney World and saying one guy designed all of this. There is an implication of lots of different artists and craftspeople working on this thing. And I'm a part of it by visiting, and they are a part of it by creating, and we're all a part of a thing. And when I go to the Rare Books Library at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and I see, a Psalter hymnal from the early 1300s, and they know, hey, we figured out that exactly 4 guys did this, and we will never know what their names are. I'm connecting still with those guys, those nameless guys across the centuries. And that's no less meaningful for me not having their name. I don't have a problem with a lack of credit. I have a problem with a lack of relationship. And I have a problem with a lack of relationship, especially when a pretense for relationship is being presented. Look at this original artwork. Look at the raised acrylic bumps all over it that show that someone did it. You have a one-of-a-kind artwork, and there's no MFer anywhere on that thing. That I find atrocious.
I love that you. I mean, I love that you have never been to Colin Karras Design's website, but I just love one of the pieces that I pulled up. I also had to pull down the flavor text, which I hoped to have a moment to read to you because it's so good. But it is, quote, "Embrace retro chic style with the abstract print, touchable texture, and golden hue of this eye-catching art piece."
Get absolutely wrecked. No.
That's just exactly what you were saying. Yeah, right.
It's bad. And I'm okay. So I want to go on 2 simultaneous rants here, and then I'll toss it back to you to hear what you think about the relationship thing. First of all, I just because there was some important information I collected that I'm worried that if I don't throw it in now, we're not going to get to it all. So the first thing is the example that we're using is people like young college students going in and getting a canvas. And look, do I want you to go out and support your local artist at the countless arts fairs and local arts guilds that every small town in America has? Yes, of course, I want you to do that. But do I blame you for not being an art critic enough to know that that's the thing you should do and the ethics of that? No, of course I don't. Who do I blame, though? I do blame the hotel companies that are buying
good. I'm glad
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things and putting these things. I blame the 2x4 apartment buildings that are spreading up all over this country like daisies in response to the housing crisis that put this shit all over their lobbies. That I have a huge problem with, because those businesses do actually have a responsibility to the town that they're setting up in. And it would be very, very easy for the Holiday Inn in Boogesboro, Wisconsin, to find some local artist who, even if they wanted to buy 100 prints from the guy, they don't need 100 original things for their rooms. They could totally do that, and they don't because of the Colin Karrases of the world making it easier for them, and that bothers the living hell out of me. So that's one thing. I just want to take it off the personal responsibility thing, because there are levels of huge organization after huge organization after huge organization, all participating in this weird domino effect, each of them pretending that there's a one-to-one connection between original artist and buyer. And there aren't. There are about 6 organizations with 10,000 people working for them in between, all pretending to be one guy. And that's gross. Second thing, we're making reference to the textured thing, and I want to break for this. I need your help with the German, but there are basically we're talking about 3 separate art forms, quote unquote, here. Okay. First, we're talking about photo prints.
Right.
So we're talking about a tech in which you can literally just print a painting on a canvas. Okay. And tons of artists do this. I have even sold prints of my own work printed out on a canvas. This is a print. And again, if it goes through this domino effect of all these huge organizations, I would really, really like if the artist were credited some degree in order to maintain the sanctity of the artist and viewer relationship, but that's neither here nor there. Then there's this second thing, and this is what I need your help with the pronunciation of. Are you familiar with this word? I think it's feel, F-I-E-H-L, feel?
F-I-E-H-L. No.
I assume that's how you pronounce it. It's a German word. Feel art. Okay. And this is where a photo is printed and then resin is quickly brushed on certain parts of it by hand to give the impression that it was hand painted from several feet away.
Oh man, I love that. Oh man, I love everything about that. That's so corrupt.
The majority of Homegoods art and like all these kinds of arts, right?
That is so hot.
You'll look. I remember because for this episode I went to one of these Homegoods and I saw this like huge 4x5 canvas, ungodly large, of a Texas Longhorn.
Yes.
And as I walk past it, like the brush strokes actually glint, and I'm like, holy shit, is this real? And I walk up, no, there's just 4 strategic places where someone just gone with resin and made it look raised.
Oh man, that's incredible. That is incredible.
This was a process that apparently was basically created back in the 1950s and 60s in England when a company called Feel Art Productions or Reproductions just decided to just release a shit ton of Van Goghs. And they just printed all of these Van Goghs, and they had all these women in like little smocks, and you can watch a video of it. All these women in their little smocks in 1963 just taking resin and just blip, 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 blip. And then it's like, oh, you've got a Van Gogh. And people are buying this at art print prices.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's gross. And then there's this third type where someone actually is going in and painting these things by hand.
Oh.
And we do have to get into that because that's a whole other aspect of this. But you will go in and these are the most expensive ones. These are the ones that you're seeing.
This is the one like that we started talking about, whose name, by the way, is actually given. That artist with the artfully distressed, contrasting, and unique design of this dollar bill wall art. His name is actually given for what it's worth. Actually,
okay. Sometimes most of the time, they're not given,
but that is actually, I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but like I think that's actually so to speak, either a one of a kind object or a limited run object. I mean, they're expensive to produce, though. They're multi-level and stuff, and this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I looked him up. His name is Zax, E.M. Zax. He's a multimedia pop artist. He mostly he sells stuff like he mostly takes found objects and then spatters paint on them. I mean
Sure.
spatter
Yeah,
art paint on them. So he'll you can go to his website and buy a saxophone that he has spatter painted and put in a shadow box frame for whatever,
fine.
$3,000 or something.
But that's even a separate thing from what I'm talking about, which is this other type of, they are not limited run. There are hundreds of thousands of them, but they are real acrylic being placed on.
And these are totally anonymous.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But I just want to be, I'm going to turn it back over to you on the relationship thing, but I just want to be clear. Number one, that I do, if insofar as I'm lambasting anyone, I want to be lambasting the hotels and apartment complexes and these kinds of predatory organizations that are using this kind of art. And then two, I want to be clear about how really there are actually kind of three categories that we're talking about here.
That's really helpful. No, that's good. I also would not have known. I assumed it was all more or less photo printing. I didn't know about the feel technique stuff, but that's totally there. But speaking about soulless, impersonal, multinational entities, I want to take a moment to point out that, of course, Created Things is brought to you by the not so soulless Catholic Creatives organization. The purpose of which is to ignite a new renaissance of faith through prayer, beauty, and the creative spirit. The goal is pretty dear, actually, to the heart of the topics that we're talking about today, which is to connect real people, to connect and support and promote real artists and innovators and makers and storytellers across the faith, which, again, as we've been talking about, does take a lot of people, so if you are somebody who has, a little bit of cash that you think that you could fruitfully use on a one-time donation or a monthly basis to support Catholic artists, or if you, for instance, run a Catholic hotel chain, or you're just a dude who runs a hotel chain, I encourage you to support Catholic Creatives on Patreon, at the very least, to support what we're doing here, in fact, to keep food on Jacob's baby's table, etc., which is what supporting
it's
patron
a
does.
Small table. The baby has his own
very
table.
small table, but the way of nature, it will grow is the problem. Anyway, and cool things that Catholic Creatives does, running summits and cool stuff like that. So, again, go to catholiccreatives.org/support. And also, again, if for your soulless hotel chain, your soulless apartment complex built out of 2x4s and drywall, and your soulless TGI Fridays chain of franchises, you should decorate them with catholiccreatives.org, Catholic.store products.
You're confusing the people here. You're mixing up our URLs, man.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing what I want. Okay, if you got confused, you can go back and listen to it again. I know you're driving. Just back it up, okay? It'll be cool. Slow it down so it's not ×3 speed this time. Okay. Catholic.store. And you can buy some stuff.
Slowing it down for all you kids out there. All you lovers out there.
All right, so listen. This reminds me, though, that so one of my very favorite websites of all time is McMansionHell.com.
Yes, I love that website.
She's the finest human being. I adore her. And she has this.
We should interview her.
Yes, I know. I am actively thinking about this. Trying to scheme on this because she's the absolutely finest. So it's this woman who she was just an architecture student who just knows a ton about the history of architecture and thought that wouldn't it be hilarious to like comb Zillow especially for like photographs of the most embarrassing McMansions and explain actually like do a ton of incredibly helpful teaching of the principles of architecture by means of just making the absolutely most uproariously hilarious roasts of like how trashy McMansions are, and she has this trope that she uses in a lot of her posts where like she'll have, because these McMansions, it's not only that they're bad architecturally on the outside, they do tend to also be pretty bad on the inside, decorated pretty badly,
worse on the inside,
even worse on the inside if it's possible. And one trope that she has caught in these Zillow postings is that on these like massively like over decorated, just like architectural disaster, sort of like horror vacui kind of like everything has to have something in it sort of images, like spaces in people's real houses, there will always be a space in this like expensive like lawyer foyer, she calls it, the big entryway that has no purpose except for to like make a bunch of echoes that mean that nobody could ever walk through the space.
My wife and I have this thing that we do whenever we go to a place with one of those, which are often like museums and botanical gardens and things like this. We'll always like run to the top. Ever since we started dating, we run to the top and we just come out the door. We spread our arms and we go, "Welcome to our home." And then we just walk down together. Yeah. I love lawyer foyers.
That's so amazing. So the lawyer foyer will usually have what she calls, quote, an art in it. Mm-hmm. And she'll always label that as such, an art.
Yeah.
And that exactly captures the spirit here, is that like, you know what? I don't actually want, and we're talking to the worst case scenario, but like we're talking about hotels and apartment buildings and some of these things that are really kind of whatever. It's like, I don't actually want to hire an art buyer at all. Of any kind of art buyer. So what I do is I just have I get a contract with a kind of like art contracting company, and they send me 50 10x8 images on canvas, and I put them all over my hotels. And what I literally need is an art in this space. And in that sense, it's very akin to something that drives me particularly wild, which is that there a lot of used bookstores kind of survive by this. Actually, it's a little embarrassing, but so if you have the same perspective on an art that you have, if you have that same perspective, only now you imagine that you've moved into a place and you are not like a new starting up post-college kind of person, but you're like pretty wealthy. And so you bought a house and there are either bookshelves built in, or the bookshelves are a really cool design feature for a certain kind of interior space.
Oh, sure.
And so you go to, but you don't have any books. Or if you do, it's a couple of like raggedy half-read volumes of like the 50 Shades series, and you're not going to put them out. And that's kind of whatever. Or you have a couple of like, things to do in Thailand books and like whatever. It's just not enough for a bookshelf. So you go to your local used bookstore, and you tell them, or better yet, actually usually what you do is you hire an interior designer who like goes to the Strand bookstore in New York and tells them, quote, "I need 100 feet of red."
Oh God, that breaks my heart.
And they give you 100 feet of red books. There was this incredible. So my eldest brother was getting a PhD in classics, and there are these really nice, these kind of like staple editions of the Greek and Roman classics that every classic student covets because they are very small. They're these really small kind of handheld, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful, attractive to read, and they have the original language on one side and then the English translation on the other side. And so when you're learning and stuff, they're just very, very helpful student editions. They're kind of expensive though. They're like $35 each or so, and there's like hundreds of them, you know. And so like any classic student is sort of very covetous of these. Like I work in a lot of my Latin texts are going to be in these texts as well, and I also kind of covet them, you know. So my brother one time found a photograph in a magazine of like this like beautifully designed room that had like this big bookshelf running across the length of it, and one half of it was red, and one half of it was green, and all of the grad students in his department lost their shit because the Greek volumes in this series are green and the Latin volumes in this series are red, and they are perfectly uniform, handsome size in this really attractive green and this really attractive red. And some interior design lady had just spent $5,000 buying a bunch of Loeb editions and put like, on the left hand of your living room is your Greek section, and on the right hand of your living room is your Latin section. You know neither Greek nor Latin, but these are green and these are red.
Well, and you're hitting on the main problem with this, right? Because it's everybody just agreeing to pretend, and it's so dishonest. And at the beginning of this episode, I was like, why am I not okay with this, but I am okay with Christmas kitsch and everything I said to defend the baby's first Christmas ornament and all these kinds of things in that episode? And I think it's this. No one is making any pretense of, oh, look at this beautiful baby's first Christmas ornament. And it was created by, you know, and here it is. And it's so, you know, pretty, and it's one of a kind, blah, 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 blah. There's no pretense. It's sold as junk. You know it's junk, and then you bring meaning to it. And I think that's beautiful. And that's that sort of velveteen rabbiting kind of thing that I was pitching in that episode, right? This is not that. This is a company pretending that this is a unique work of art created by some unique artist who we're just not going to credit. That is another company buying that art just because they want something to look like an art, but they don't have any significance or attachment to it. And then that's a third party, either another company or another person, or perhaps even an intermediary like an art buyer coming in and saying, I also don't know what this is. I also don't care about it, and it has no meaning, but I'm going to pretend like I do. And it's just such an emperor's new clothes parade of nonsense that it to me, it's a fundamentally different thing from the kitsch conversation. And I think you just, with this whole thing of the Latin and Greek text, helped me realize why I think they're different, because she didn't know the significance of those books. And to someone out there, that's going to be significant, the same way that a baby's first Christmas ornament is going to be significant. And they should have been allowed to have that. But because of this model of mass production, and not just mass production, but production for the masses via SEO, you get this very insidious, gross parade of you hit the nail on the head for me there. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really helpful way to put it. It's sort of like connoisseurship undone, right? So like technically speaking, when we're talking about art, like connoisseurship is this art buyers, art dealers, it's distinctly different from being an art historian, but it's just that you know a lot about the art, and you know its worth, and you can point to its details, and you can talk about who's going to like it, and you can sell it well, and you can sort of have it land in the right spot, and you can be perfectly earnest about the whole thing, you can be perfectly corrupt about the whole thing, perfectly manipulative or perfectly open, whatever you want to be, but there is at the root of it is the sense of like, at least I know the thing itself very well. Sometimes it's manipulative. Like, I think this is actually garbage, or I'm gonna amp up the auction costs because then that will be like a big investment for me, and like that kind of stuff. Okay, so you do get that, but but so that's connoisseurship, is that you kind of know these things, and even if you're corrupt about the way that you do it, it is based on the thing itself, and like recognizing and appreciating the value of the thing itself, which was having some connection to the person who made it and the home that's going to land in, or the holding tank next to an airport that's going to land in, or whatever. And where this is like this is what would you call that? If it's the reverse of connoisseurship, it'd be like ignorance ship, right? I mean, it's all based on this, that like I don't actually know what this is supposed to be. I'm going to sell it to a bunch of people who don't really know what this is supposed to be. You don't know what it's supposed to be. But like, all I know is that when like 9 people out of 10, and this is actually not to give any kind of, this is not to be superior at all. Like, just a basic fact is 9 people out of 10 are going to walk by this and their mind is going to register an art, and they're just going to keep walking. And they might, 2 or 3 out of those 9 people might be like, oh, that's, I kind of like, I dig the vibe of having an art in this space, and then 1 of those 10 is going to be like, I hate this freaking ant art. This is the worst ant art I've ever seen in the history of ant arts.
Because even if they don't understand the art, they respect that art exists, and they respect that artists exist, and they recognize on some level, as I am, that it's offensive. There's a particularly funny example of what you're talking about here. There's these, there are these architectural tour videos that have become incredibly popular online. Different companies, different magazine imprints like GQ or Reader's Digest or different things will do like a tour of a celebrity's home. Okay. And you'll sort of see it POV as though you're following the celebrity, and they're like, oh, here's my beautiful home.
Oh, that sounds so
it's
trashy.
Always this curated fake thing where. And in some cases, it turns out it's not even their house.
Yeah.
It's just a staged house. And the funniest example, you mentioned the ragged copies of 50 Shades of Grey. So the actress who starred in 50 Shades of Grey, Dakota Johnson, did one of these things.
Oh, dear.
And they like paid her a bunch of money. And she walked through the house, and it's her house, right? And she walks over to the counter and she says, this is my bowl of kiwis. I always make sure that my assistant keeps this bowl of kiwis here because kiwis have this very, ancient and significant meaning in terms of new life, and they mean a lot to me, and they're very important in my creative process. And she like walks along, and in an interview, I think with Fallon later on, like 2 weeks later, he was like, that was so weird. Why did you talk about kiwis? And she was like, that wasn't my freaking house. I'm allergic to kiwis. I just made that up.
Okay, that is suddenly the only thing I respect about any of her creative process.
Right. But like so I love that she was that candid about it after the fact. It was kind of just making a joke about how bullshit the whole thing was. But this is what we're talking about. This is the problem that we're talking about. Before you get into how this art is actually made and produced, which we still have to touch on briefly before the end of this conversation. And before we get into all this stuff, it's a degradation of what art is, especially as far as this relational component. And I do, before we move on to how this stuff is made, do you agree with my sentiments on the relationship part of this?
I think it's interesting. I can sort of accept it as given. I think I'd need to do a little bit more thinking about whether like I feel its motive power, I think for me, the bigger concern is with the object, like the quality of the object, its character. I feel like, and this is a good thing to distinguish between with kitsch, because like one of the things that I was frustrated about with both with kitsch and then with Christmas songs was that like the thing itself actually is kind of a pit for the mind. Like it's creating a negative space where something positive needs to be, that like this actually doesn't, like I put an art on my wall and it doesn't actually become the kind of thing that can like train my heart to reflect and to contemplate and to pause and to look, like it doesn't do any of the things like why I would want an art on my wall. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by this emphasis on the relationality. And so I don't in any way, I don't have any concerns about it. I just, the thing that immediately grabs my attention and sort of gets me worked up is the object itself, and like the effect that the way in which it can forestall and undermine the event in the person that like real art is supposed to do.
Okay. So then, and obviously you still have different opinions on like the Christmas kitsch stuff than I do, and just kitsch in general than I do, where I'm saying, hey, yes, a uniquely crafted piece of art would be preferable to this, but the fact that this is essentially an empty vessel that someone can, again, the baby's first Christmas ornament, someone can pour their own significance into, that is not problematic. That is maybe less than ideal, but it's not bad, and it's beautiful in its own unique way. I'm saying this, though, this stuff we're talking about today is one, or at least one, probably several standard deviations further down the rabbit hole, where it is pretending to actually be a significant piece of art. It is not pretending to be mass-produced baby's first Christmas ornament nonsense. And so it isn't even inviting you to put your own significance into it. It's just inviting you to pretend that it's significant to you.
Good.
And
that's a really useful distinction.
Gross.
Yeah. I buy that 100%. I buy that 100%.
Okay.
Like I might even be willing. I think you convinced me when we were talking about kitsch to follow you on down that hole actually. But on this, I agree with you completely that this is actually why is this creating a sort of negative, like a pit where there should be a raised a mountain by which I can be raised up and see my life better. But instead I'm falling into a pit. It's because I think that's a really helpful point, that this is proposed in the mode of something that is really unique and special. And it is not. There is no there. There's exactly no there. This is a trading around of ignoranceurship, right? And that's all it is.
Yeah, and it just requires so many people to participate in the pantomime, right?
So this there's this really interesting first half of the 20th century German Jewish Marxist thinker named Walter Benjamin, who he wrote this really important and influential essay called "The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction." He's a Marxist. Sounds like a good bedtime story to me. Yeah, for sure. So like some of it's kind of paint by numbers, no pun intended in the context, because Marx is just kind of Marx. But it's a really important essay, and it is really worth reading. And he makes a lot of really interesting, because he's just trying to really reflect on like what happened to art when it became infinitely reproducible. And he's writing in the 30s, but he's already in this world of already infinite reproducibility because of photographs and then film and stuff. And he has this really interesting point that. Now he's talking apropos of the Dadaists and what they were doing, but he says, in the decline of middle-class society, contemplation became a school of asocial behavior. It was countered by distraction as a variant of social conduct. Now, I like that very much, and I think this is sort of a comment on what we were just talking about, which is that the value of actually having a piece of art, again, whether it's an original, or what, but having an art on your wall is that it can be, certainly decoration, and these are all, the beautifying your space in which you live, those are all wonderful. In doing so, it does create an invitation to a certain contemplation, that there's something that is actually worth taking a little bit of time to reflect and to look at here. And that if I do give myself the luxury of taking that time to look at the thing that I put on my wall, it rewards it. Actually, that it helps me to grow deeper. It helps me to understand and appreciate and love a little bit more this piece and the context of my life in which I placed it and all that. Benjamin's argument is that in the contemporary moment, although even this, he's talking the 30s, but you think how much more in ours, that sort of like contemplative, slow thinking, slow reflection is now like a kind of antisocial behavior. And that social behavior, pro-social behavior, is distraction. Kind of everything moving to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next, to the next thing. Things that don't need to be looked at long to be processed, things that don't need to be contemplated nor to be understood and received and moved on. And this an art style of like, design that we've been talking about, these kind of calling Karis designs or whatever, is exactly that. Like it has the shape of a piece of art, but in the end, it is only an art, which is a project, like a product of distraction, meant to distract the viewer, and that's all it is. And that's all it is. It's just meant to distract, nothing else. And that, I think, and he says like this is a particular function of its infinite reproducibility, its infinite replicability. And I think there is something really dramatically going on there in these sort of mass home goods,
and is
Marshall,
he
TJ
speaking
Maxx
about
stuff.
this? Because you're narrating it critically, and you're saying, is he saying that's a good thing?
No, he's also describing it as bad. He's saying this is bad as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Because I would have thought, okay, yeah, that confused me, because I thought because of the kind of Marxist leanings and the participation in the broader community, that's okay. All right, I think I'm following you now.
Yeah, he has this incredible line in the essay where he says, again, speaking about this world of infinite reproducibility of where like the uniqueness, the oneness, the somethingness, what he calls like the aura of a work of art, is by nature totally destroyed. So what the ability to form a relationship with the artist, would be part of this kind of irreplaceable, unreproducible aura of an individual work of art. So that's all gone, and when you're focused on reproduction, on infinite reproduction, that's just all gone by definition. He's this great kind of summary statement about where we are, and he says, quantity has been transmuted into quality.
Ooh.
And I love that. I love that, because that hits it, right? Like you're calling Karis designs, your Bed Bath & Beyond sort of abstract pebbled art. Quantity has been transmuted into quality.
So we're talking about Marxists. We're talking about communists. We're talking about mass-produced art. And you had mentioned that this mass-produced stuff draws to mind little minions chained to desks.
Oh, please, by all means, tell me more. Tell me more about these little minions chained to desks.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how chained they are exactly. There's a lot of debate on that. But I'm going to go back into my serial voice for this one. So, Kyle, cue up that music here.
The more you know. Gosh, that's not it.
It's not the same. You need to listen to other podcasts. My God. All right. I decided to do some digging. Where were all these paintings coming from? Turns out they all come from one town. A place called Dauphin in China produces 60% of the world's total oil paintings. In this town, over 8,000 individual painters receive orders for as many as 250,000 paintings at a time, and in front of several canvases, proceed to paint one brushstroke on each, identically, until every single painting has been produced identically to the one before it. This is the work of a man called Huang Xiang, who helped develop Dauphin into the community that it is now. In fact, this is a common thing in China, whole cities dedicated to a particular trade. A lot of the world's Christmas stuff, in fact, 60% of it, is produced in Yiwu, China. But these paintings, that's Dauphin's job. I'm Jacob Popchak. This is Created Things.
That is the most mind-blowing thing I've ever heard. This is real. This is real.
So yeah, literally. Now, it's not a sweatshop in this sense, or at least the website Instapainting would argue that it's not a sweatshop, because these artists are not paid per hour. They are paid per painting.
Wait, doesn't that's worse usually? Usually you want to be pay per hour and not per product.
Well, what they're arguing is that this is more respectful of the fact that these are unique artists because they're being paid for their individual work. So they are paid by painting. Some of these people, it's estimated about 10% of the total people have their own art studios in Dauphin.
Oh, cool.
And this is what they use to pay the bills. And then they go home and they sell their own individual work. And sometimes, I guess, people have argued that their work will then be bought by the factory to then be mass produced. But the footage is insane. We're literally
there's footage of this.
Yeah. So I'm sitting in front of 3 canvases, and I dip my brush in the red, and I do on the first one, on the second one, on the third one. And then I dip my brush in the blue and I go, and I build 3 paintings at exactly the same time. So it's not an assembly line.
Okay. That was my first thought, was assembly line.
It's not an assembly line.
But I'm just
painting like the dog, and then someone else paints the monkey, and then someone else paints the apple. No. I'm just tripling every brushstroke I do.
Oh, I see.
And that is all of these. So, it's the 2 categories, right? The ones that are just photo printed, those are mostly done in India. But the ones that are either have the resin on them, the feel art, or these, which are considered like the finer stuff. This is all done this way, and it's almost all done in Dauphin. I mean, again, consider that statistic. Not 60% of mass-produced art. 60% of the planet's oil paintings are produced by these 8,000 people at as many as 10,000 paintings a month.
Oh my gosh.
In one town.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
And that's who people like, I already forgot her name, Colleen. That's what's happening here. An artist in America is being hired to create something as hack and as broad appeal as possible. It not only shouldn't have subtext, it can't have subtext. It can't have any information or meaning at all. That's why I'm seeing a painting of a longhorn. That's for the little country girls and the Republican kids. And then the Eiffel Tower is for the, chicks who want to tour Europe after college. And the dollar sign is for the guy who has a DJ business after work. And these are just the most common distilled parodies of identity. So some American is hired to do that. 8,000 people in China are hired to do identical brushstrokes across 10,000 canvases a month. Those are then produced and paid for by a business like Colleen's, which are then sold wholesale to either art dealers and buyers like you're talking about for hotels and things, or sold directly to a Homegoods or a TJ Maxx, and then those go to the consumer either directly or by way of the shittily put together apartment complex or hotel.
That is amazing. That's amazing.
And this is the story of how art, which is fundamentally about craftsmanship, meaning, and relationship, becomes an assembly line of macabre bullshit where every single individual person knows the person behind them in the parade, knows the person in front of them in the parade, and yet pretends not to.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, nothing about what's produced, purchased, used, or placed is actually worth the time. I mean, it's not worth looking into it. Right.
No.
Like, that's the other thing. I mean, but that's why all the links are broken, because nothing, I mean, this is Benjamin's point, like nothing, the purest way to make sure that you create something that's a distraction is to make something that catches somebody's eye for the moment, produces the right reaction, and does not create any possibility of further engagement.
And how did this happen? And maybe this is too long a topic. Maybe we just need to wrap up. But what I scratch my head at is, how did this happen? Because this is so fundamentally counter to what art is supposed to be. I mean, the religious equivalent of this would be if every Catholic didn't believe in God, didn't believe in the Eucharist, didn't ever read a single ounce of scripture, but just every single day got up in the morning and hired someone, not at church, but just hired someone to put ashes on their head and then just walked around. Like, that would be the equivalent of this. So counter to what actual art this is.
Yeah.
How did we make art the exact antithesis, the opposite of this? It just flummoxed. And on this broad a scale, there's like 3 Homegoods within 15 minutes of my house. And that's not including the TJ Maxx's and the Targets and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
that's freaking what?
This, I know. It does kind of boggle the mind. I mean, it is sort of like, it's like the Enlightenment's perception about what religion is on steroids, only about art. It's like, nobody really believes it. It's not really worth anything. We're going to go through these rhythms for certain things because I have a wall and I need an art on it. And like, everyone knows I need an art on it, but like, art's stupid. So I'm going to put it up here and it'll be great. No, I know. I won't give you Benjamin's whole thesis, but he is convinced it's connected with the reproducibility of art. And then with the way in which reproducibility severs art from its kind of cultic religious function, and makes it a kind of commodifies it in a way that has to sort of race to the lowest common denominator. He says, speaking about film, actually, but because it's a mass art form, but this kind of thing, because it's mass designed and oriented and published and stuff like that, it all kind of comes to the same effect. He says that he says the individual reactions are predetermined by the mass audience response they're about to produce. So like, I have done my search engine optimization, I have done my focus grouping, and so I know what I can kind of design what's the next big thing, or I can be riding on the wave of what's the current thing, or old standbys like everybody loves dogs in suits. Question mark.
Right. Or you can be creating the trends of tomorrow.
Or we can create the trends of tomorrow, and we create this thing that sort of has a way of sort of communicating and then cultivating the response that the consumer needs to have, which is like, that is an art that would look good on my wall. Excuse me, that's not the right way to put it. Like, that like space over the couch like needs something that kind of makes it pop, and then like that meets people. I need something that kind of sounds like me, that's just like me. So,
but here's what I'm going to end on this, and then I'll throw it over to you to wrap up. It's that sounds like me thing that I think ultimately is actually the biggest problem with this. Past the potential human rights violations, past the parade of pretending and the complete destructuring of what art is actually meant to be. It's not you. That picture of a bull, of a Texas Longhorn over your couch, or that crappy resin feel art glossy Eiffel Tower, because I think that's the most proliferated one. That isn't you. You aren't just that. And I think that this is the big danger of when art becomes commodified this way, is that the artist becomes commodified and then the viewer becomes commodified, right? I don't care about the unique unrepeatability of the artist. I don't care about the unique unrepeatability of the person viewing it. All you are, like, you're just an SEO term now. You're just a Republican girl, and so therefore you get a Longhorn. You're just a DJ, so therefore you get an ampersand. You're just a cosmopolitan wannabe, so you get you get an Eiffel Tower. And that's why I ultimately think, to go back to my human person thing, this is so bad. Because anything that actually does reduce art reduces the person. I'll leave it at that.
I think it's a good place to end on. That there's this whole thing around us, we can go to like a ton of different kinds of stores anywhere in America and pick ourselves up a whole stack of $39.99 and arts. And we can embrace the retro chic style with that abstract print, its touchable texture, and its golden hue. And we can discover that it is, in fact, an eye-catching art piece that expresses just exactly who I am right now. Or, and I am going to set these in opposition, you can go for and create cool things.
You've been listening to Creative Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives, hosted by Father Gabriel Toretta OP and Jacob Flores Popchek, produced by Jessica Flores Popchek and Kyle Meineke. To find out more about how you can support the podcast and other ventures for artists, visit catholiccreatives.org/support.